Hi, I'm Kizzy from Kizzy Creations and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe if you enjoy my content. So in today's video, I made a angry princess doll from 13 Ghosts. Okay, it's a movie. Now, I will say it's a little explicit. So if you don't want to see that, go ahead and skip this video. But my dad introduced us to horror movies when we were really young, and I decided that I want to do something kind of related to that. So, 13 Ghosts, it has an angry princess. She's very feminine. The Monster High doll that I was using was Ghoulia, and this is the first time I've actually ever used her before, and I really enjoyed doing her face up. It was actually pretty easy considering that I was a little nervous to make this one. But if you guys like my content, you want to see more, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later. First, I decided to make my own yarn color, and I took rubbing alcohol and acrylic paint to mix the color that I was specifically going for. It kind of worked. I don't know if I would do it again, but it did make a similar color enough that when I put it on the head, I could match it. I took the color that I wanted to match the hair with. It would be a little bit off, but it's okay. I was still just wanted to make sure the scalp wasn't gray. I painted that and then I put some Mod Podge over it just to make sure that the paint was sealed. It was time to put the head on. I did kind of struggle a little bit because I didn't have the right drill bit to be able to round out the neck part to have a bigger hole. But I finally got it on, and then it was time to work on the arms because I was nervous about doing the hands and the arms since I was missing those appendages. So I went back to the face up after, but here we are trying to make some arms. I just took some wire and some super glue just to glue them in place, and then I used my epoxy to just build up an arm shape because I've never built arms before or sculpted arms or hands. This is what I was thinking was the best option to do. It was very hard at first, but I might be able to do it next time again, but more practice is what I need. The more I work with epoxy, the better I feel like I'm learning with it and able to maneuver it a little bit better. But here I'm just placing them on the wire. It doesn't stick very well to the wire, so I need to figure out how to do that better. But I just built it up on both sides, and then I decided to make some kind of hand out of resin, and I just did a mold cast of a previous hand that I had from a different doll because I felt like I didn't know if I was going to be able to sculpt it, which in the end I ended up sculpting the other hand anyways, so it was good practice. So here's when I took some air dried clay and then I just pressed the hand that I had into it to make a mold. And then I poured some resin into it, and then I didn't do the other side, which I should have did a double mold, but I only did one side of the hand, which is fine, I guess, because her hand was going to be face down. But this wasn't actually a bad idea. So if I ever need to do this again, I actually would recommend doing this. Then I drilled a hole into the arm that I previously made, and I used some super glue and I stuck the resin hand into there, hoping that it would fit good. It does look a little bit big, but it'll have to do. Now for the other hand, I did end up having to free sculpt this because I did not know how to get the hand to bend in a certain way while keeping it resin. So I did sculpt this. This is my second try. The first one looked like a boxing glove, so I think this one looks pretty good. Just a little bit big as well, but I'm still learning. Starting on the face up, I did make the slashes first so then I could work freely over without having to worry about making the scars and messing up any work. So I just made a couple of scar indentations on her face, and then I went in with my pastels to add some aura effect to her face. Now this is my first time blushing to make it look like someone's not alive. So I tried to keep the skin tone color still in there because I didn't want her to be too heavy and dark. It was also kind of hard to match her blushing because all the pictures I could find on the internet weren't very high quality, so I was kind of struggling with that. Now it was time to add some blushing to her scars so I could see the indentation a little bit better. I went with the light colors first, and then I went in with a darker color. And I also did decide to use my watercolor pencils in the creasing as well, just to add a more prominent pop to it. Like I said a second ago, I was relying heavily on the pictures that I could find. And in the end, me thinking that this was going to be really, really hard actually ended up being like the smoothest process I've ever done for a face up. This one was actually the quickest I've finished one. This is when I took my watercolor pencil and made the scar more prominent. I did take the same color for her lip combo. I did end up taking a little darker red and filling in her lips a little bit more because I was going to use the same color I used before, but I thought it would look too bright and red lip like. So this is when I took some gray pencils just to sketch out her eyes so I could start working on the shape, because her eyes are a little bit different. She doesn't have any color to her eyes. They're just straight black with a big iris. Because her eyes didn't really have any dimension and I just got to use one solid color, this was like the easiest eyes I've ever done. And I felt like it was just so plain because there was nothing for me to do. I'm not gonna lie, I actually really do love these pencils because look at how much the black is showing up. It is so pigmented. I didn't have to do extra coats over and over and over. It's been a blessing using these pencils. So now it's time to go over the gray because the gray was just my base layer to be able to do the eye shape. So I just took some black and covered the gray. I added a pink peachy tone to the eyelids just to kind of form an eyelid because this doll kind of didn't have that dimension for me anymore once I did the black. So I just took a little bit of pink. So I'm just alternating between my colors just to make sure that I'm adding some kind of dimension to her eyes. I feel like when I first was trying to think of this project to do and how I was gonna be able to do it, I was stressing myself. But it was kind of fun because I feel like I could be messy without having to be concerned about it being perfect. I didn't have to be perfect on this project. So you'll just see me going over some of the parts I already have done on the face. I just wanted to enhance it more and, just add your layers after doing the MSC sprays. So I'm just adding some more pigment, some more grays, some more blacks to her eyes. And then this is when I said I didn't want the red lip to be so prominent. I went in with some black and I just kind of smudged it all over. So now it's time for some eyebrows. I really thought I was done with the face up until I realized I forgot her eyebrows. Now the eyebrows, I was struggling with the shape. It's not perfect, but I took an eraser and just kept trying to shape them up and then it turned out fine. Then I took a couple of browns and added some dimension to her eyebrows. And this little eraser pencil that I got from Michael's has been a lifesaver, getting in them little creases. Just keep touching up as I go. Time to add some catch lights. I added 2 different sizes on each eye. And I did that with acrylic paint and a dotting tool. I always love this part when I'm done with the face up when I just get to look and see how everything tied together, but this is what she's looking like. Just because I didn't have much time in the day, I decided to work on the little knives that I had to make. I made 2 different versions and I liked the bigger knife a little bit better, so then I just sanded it down. I used epoxy to make this, and now it's time to paint it. And I did realize later that I should have painted the handle wood color, and I did fix that. later in the video, but here I am just using a metallic silver and then just paint it to make it look like it's a knife. I feel like it looks so cute because I like miniature things, but here's what it's looking like. Like I said, I changed that handle later, but I think it'll do. Now, if you've seen 13 Ghosts, you know that the Angry Princess has some really big boobs. Now, I did make one of the boobs sitting a little bit higher because when you raise your arm, it's like natural for your one of your boobs to go up. So if you look at them, one's a little bit higher than the other, so it looks kind of funky, but it'll have to do. And I also didn't separate them enough. But honestly, these things are so hard to make because they're so small. But in the end, it looks like what it's supposed to look like, and I'll take it. So this is where I started to have to think out of the box because I looked on Amazon. I looked everywhere for a bathtub resin mold. So I took my glasses case and I wrapped it in saran wrap, and then I put some hot glue and I covered the whole thing, like the size of what the bathtub is supposed to be. I covered that with glue. Now I was able to pop it out after, so that's why I decided to use my glasses case because it's a little bit more flexible. Then I just covered it in resin with a couple of coats over and over and over just to make sure that it had that strong hold to it. And I feel like it started to look like a bathtub after, but right now I was not thinking it looked great. So I added some feet to it just so it could stand without it being all the way on the ground. I feel like this was going to help it look more bathtubby. I don't know. I just tried something. But then I took some straws because I thought that the lip of the bathtub was not looking enough like a bathtub for me. So I took some straw, I did some resin around it as well just to make it hard, and then I painted it white. I wanted it to look porcelain, so painted it white and then added the resin over that. And the makeshift bathtub is starting to look like a bathtub. Now, the only reason I said I couldn't use any of the resin molds that I found online is because they were not fitting the Monster High dolls, so I had to make my own. It was time to super glue her joints. Then I was able to put the epoxy over it and solidify her in the position that I wanted her to be in. I wanted her to just be sitting in the bathtub. It didn't have to be nothing crazy. And I feel like because her body was going to be half covered either by the resin or just her sitting down, like the under parts of her, it didn't have to be perfect. So I feel like I was able to kind of not rush through these steps, but basically rush through these steps. So I was able to finish her faster once I got to this point. And I'm so sorry that it took me this long to post this video. It's not Halloween anymore. It's not even Christmas anymore. But I'm back. I'm sorry. It took a long time. But I did enjoy making this doll. It was actually a different kind of experience because I feel like every time I go to work on a doll, I'm like stressing myself out, trying to make sure that I'm executing it in the way that I want it to be. But this was like a breath of fresh air because I said like multiple times that it didn't have to be perfect. And I don't know if I'm just feeling more confident working with epoxy or the position that I put her in. I feel like the harder to reach creases, I actually was learning how to do that better because on the last doll, I feel like I was struggling so hard to smooth out her epoxy. So same thing I did on her face. I'm just making the indentations for the scars all over her body. I think she had about 10 plus scars. So I just wanted to just scrape up her body a little bit, make it easier for me to have them done now before working on half of the body and half the other like I was thinking. As you can see, I didn't even finish her hip with the epoxy, and I realized after I made the scars, I was like, oh my gosh, wait, I need to go back and do that. But yeah, here I am just putting all the scars, and then I'm gonna start painting her body so I can add that first base of blushing. Now, YouTube, please don't get mad at me for this, but I had to add her nipples because I had to make it accurate to the picture I was looking at and how she is in the movie. But then I just took my airbrush machine and started working in the color. And while we're waiting for the paint to dry, I did make a shower curtain for the bathtub. This is me making the little hooks so you can place the shower curtain on. I used some cellophane. I just tried to look around the house and see what I could make out of a shower curtain. Some cellophane was working perfectly fine. I actually thought this was a great idea in the end because it turned out pretty good. So I'm just making little holes on the top of the cellophane, and I did double layer it to make sure that it was thick enough. And then I added the hooks and hung them up, and I did seal them with resin to make sure that they weren't going to slip and move because the super glue was not working. And I think it did turn out super cute for the last minute decision to make this. I think it looks exactly what it's supposed to look like, so it'll be good enough for me. This is kind of where I feel like I messed up a little bit when I added the purple, because I didn't add any purple for her face up, but I ended up making it work in the end. So I did take purple and I covered each of her slashes, her scars, just to add some dimension, add some different look to them. I kind of had a time frame in between this, like a long time frame. So I kind of forgot what I did for her face up and I didn't want to uncover her. So this is why the purple discrepancy came in. So I feel like the body blushing technique that I do on each doll is pretty much the same. I do change up like how big the body blushing is, or maybe adding a couple different points that I do differently, but usually it's just on the same appendages, the joints, that kind of thing. So you'll see me just do the same thing that I did in the last video. I feel like I went a little bit overboard on the purple though, I'm not gonna lie, but it still looked decent. Like I said, I just had to end up matching her face a little bit more because I didn't add any purple in the beginning. Again, still a little nervous to post this, but I did have to shade her nipples, so she had to have some kind of blushing there. So I just made it look a little dark. You know how a body is when it's not alive anymore, it loses its color. So I tried to resemble that. And then I just kept referencing the movie and the photos just to make sure that I was coloring her right. She did have a little bit of skin tone color still, so I made sure I added that back in as well. Using the same technique I used on her face, I used my watercolor pencils to go over her slashes to make them more prominent. Then I painted her fingernails because I did sculpt these hands, so they didn't have anything on them. They didn't have any fingernails. So I did paint them just to make it look like she had something going on there. And I used a certain color to make it look like her fingernails were a little bit more purpley, more brown than our regular skin tone colors. So this is the point where I fixed my handle on my knife. I just made a wood color by mixing a couple of colors together. And it's not the perfect color, but it'll do. So then I just painted over the black handle and redid the silver lining. So now it matches the knife that she had in the original film a little bit better. This is where I went in and fixed my little mistake on her face. So this is when I was adding the little bit of purple blushing to her to match her body better. I wanted to make her slashes have glossy like blood on them. So I took my resin ink and I mixed it with my resin and I tried to resemble a color that is blood. Honestly, I couldn't get a perfect match, but it's okay. I think it still turned out pretty decent for the colors that I did have and that I was able to mix. So I'm just placing it all over every single slash on her body. She is in the bathtub in the movie where the water is going from regular water to blood water. So I added the aspect of the regular water on her face, kind of like she's sweating a little bit because it's really hot and the water's hot, or like the water had splashed on her face. So I added that all over her body. And I just did that with my dotting tool and some resin. It's time to make the stand, and I just took a piece of wood that I found in my mom's garage and I painted it with a slight hint of gray just so it kind of looks more like glass, because in the film the floor was glass. And then I also painted some streaks on it and it just made it look like it was tile with some darker gray. And this is where I was going to place the bathtub and the shower curtain on. And I ended up using resin to secure the bathtub to the floor because it was already covered in resin, and I know my super glue is not going to do the job again. Now this hairstyle, I decided to use a mixture of Elmer's glue and acrylic paint because I feel like her hair wasn't the right pigment that I wanted it to be. And this also is gonna act as a hair gel in the doll's hair for my liking because I wanted it to look like it was wet because her body is covered all with that blood water and regular water. And there was kind of trial and error with this hairstyle and the technique that I used with the Elmer's glue and the paint, but I feel like it turned out pretty decent. And I'm glad that the paint actually stuck on the hair by seeping into the fibers because it is yarn and the color just wasn't matching, and I feel like it matches a lot better. And before I placed her into the bathtub, I did want to make sure that that knife was in her hand because I feel like once I put her in there and covered it with the shower curtain, the hard to reach places were going to be extra hard. So I decided to place it in there with some super glue, and I feel like her hand turned out exactly how I wanted it to look. So the sculpting wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. So I placed her down with some resin, and then it was time to fill the bathtub with that fake blood mixture that I made. That little silicone cup that comes with the resin is not cutting it, so I ended up just using a bigger cup and making a bigger batch. And I did use a lot of resin to make this water, but it's okay because I still achieved the look I wanted to make. So I'm just covering her up, making sure every piece that is covered in the movie is also covered as well. And this is why I said that it didn't have to be perfect with her body blushing or the underparts of her body, because a lot of it's going to be covered anyways. So I made a few batches of the blood water, and I did end up splattering it all over the shower curtain to make it look like, you know, just a mess of a scene, a bloody crime scene, that kind of style. I'll try and insert a picture so you guys can see what it looks like. So yeah, just all over the shower curtain is what I did. It was kind of a last minute thing, but I did want to make a tiny little faucet, and I just made this out of my armature wire and the epoxy, and then I just painted it with my metallic silver to add that real metal look to it. And that is it for the Angry Princess of 13 Ghosts. I enjoyed this project so much, and I'm so sorry, like I said again, that I'm late because I would have loved to post this during Halloween, but I do have 2 jobs and one of them is full-time during the holidays. So once it slows down, I should be posting videos more. But I hope you guys enjoy this video. It was so much fun to make, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Love you guys.